Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of my Cedar Point Recreation Park. In the last episode we did a few ride tweaks, fixing up a couple of our old builds and adding a couple new shoestring flat rides into the park. As always, I would like to start out by saying thank you very much for your comments. There have been a couple little mistakes in some of the builds I've made so far that commenters have been able to catch and notify me so I can get those things fixed, and that is great to have. Since there's just so much going on in this park, there's definitely going to be more things I'll miss in the future. So if you see anything else that I have missed and you want me to know, definitely keep those comments coming. For the bulk of today's show, we're going to be spending our time looking at the Gemini Midway. That is the northwest, I suppose you'd say, part of the Midway that goes behind the Skyride underneath Corkscrew, where you'll find Top Thrill Dragster and several more major coasters, which we will be building today. We're going to start with one of my favorites, Magnum Xl200. And this one is a little bit interesting in that I feel like the shape of the peninsula is going to affect the shape of the coaster a bit more than the other way around, as we've seen in our previous builds. I do wind up making my version of Magnum a little bit too long on the first go round and shorten it up a little bit later on. But since it's just a lot of hills and then a turnaround and some more hills, there's not a whole lot of complicated layout going on here, and it should be pretty easy to tweak later on if we need to. But this one is a fun little build, and what I found is interesting is that this version of Magnum is almost as tall as my build of Millennium Forest I did a couple episodes ago. Still haven't figured out how I'm going to tweak Millennium to make it look a little bit more in line with the other coaster scale, but maybe by the time I'm ready to fix that, I will get some good comments from YouTube. We shall see. Also in this area, we've got the Camp Snoopy area, sort of like Kitty Kingdom, where we just have a lot of little flat rides and some restaurants and shops and things. We also have a fun little ride over here, Pipe Scream, the Zamperla Disco ride, which opened relatively recently in the park's history, and I have not been able to get on it yet. I think I've only been in the park a couple times since it's been opened, and people in my party have never been willing to ride it with me, so maybe one of these days I'll get to do it. Just as a placeholder, I've done this ride with the reverse inclined shuttle mode. I think there's a better way to do it with boosters. I need to look that up. I'm sure it's not too difficult, but I don't remember off the top of my head. But I must say, it does look pretty good with the hybrid coaster track. So that's kind of cool. There's also one other hidden coaster over here at the back of Camp Snoopy, Woodstock Express, a little junior coaster that I don't think I've ever even seen. It's really buried there behind some trees and blocked off by some fences and things. But fortunately, there's a pretty good POV of this ride, as with all other Cedar Point coasters, so it's pretty easy to find the layout for it. Unfortunately, you see me run into the issue that we have with pretty much every junior coaster on this scale, in that it is almost impossible to build in RCT and not have it be absolutely enormous. This coaster is going to cause us some layout issues a little bit later on, since it takes up a little bit more land than we would have hoped. And it's hard to get all the clearances and everything right to get the layout. But I wanted to make sure that it was in here. All told, I'm not super happy with this layout. The train goes pretty slow around most of it, and its position is a little bit problematic, so I'm probably going to come back to this one and tweak it a little bit later on. We'll see how things go once we build out a little bit more of this area. But what I found a little bit interesting was that building out this ride allowed us to get to a part of the park that I didn't think we'd be hitting anytime soon, and that is where the mine ride is located. Cedar Creek Mine Ride. A coaster that is across the water from Woodstock Express. Another coaster that I haven't ridden in quite a long time, just because it's not one of the major coasters, and usually we don't have time to get on it when we go to the park. So I definitely had to spend a lot of time looking at maps and the POV to get this one laid out correctly, because I apparently had forgotten entirely what the layout was like, aside from the fact that there are two lift hills. That's the only thing I remembered about it. A little bit difficult to get this one in as well, probably just because of scale reasons. I feel like I had to struggle a little bit to get the first drop tweaked just right and the helix before the second lift Didn't feel like there was a lot of room for everything that I wanted to build in, and I want to say that that's partially because of the way that Woodstock Express has taken up so much real estate, and we also have to make sure we can fit the railroad between them. If you look at this part of the park on Google Maps, there's a ton of space between all these 3 rides, especially between Woodstock Express and the other 2, but I was really struggling to cram everything in here. However, since there's nothing really between them except for just some trees and stuff, I think it's probably okay to have them crammed up together like this. I don't think it'll make a huge difference in the long run, but I suppose we'll see as we continue to build out this area. Finally, we worked on our last coaster of the day, which is Gemini. Another coaster I haven't ridden in quite some time, but I do have fond memories of. And with this one, you could go a couple different ways as far as how you want to build it. This is a coaster that definitely has a problematic layout in that it uses a lot of like weird diagonal angles that aren't really possible in the game. So we wind up with a layout that isn't really that accurate in terms of where the tracks are in relation to each other. All the elements are there, just not quite in the right places, and it really looks kind of weird. But I feel like there's not much we can do about that, and I think this is the best we're going to get in RCT. I am also using the wooden coaster track type as opposed to the mine ride or hybrid. You could go either way as far as track type goes. I feel like the wooden is going to be a little bit more realistic as far as looks go, since the hybrid coaster in RCT really is supposed to be the RMC hybrid and not this old Aero hybrid from 1978, predates RMC by a little bit. And the mine coaster track looks a little bit unnatural. It doesn't quite match as well as the wooden coaster track. Anyway, spent a lot of time getting the layout for this down. There is some more tweaking I would like to do with it a little bit later on. We're not going to do it today, but there is a method you can use to get a single queue line with 2 stations for a ride like this. There is a great tutorial by Brian Andrelzik out there that I'm planning on basically copying in order to get my Gemini working correctly. His video also uses Gemini as an example, so that was pretty convenient. I am basing this layout a little bit on his, but I did not copy it exactly. Trying to get a little bit more of the hills in the right places. But as always, we're taking a little bit of artistic liberty either way. So we'll come back to this a little bit later on to do some hacking. As always, I want to get the park layout, coaster layouts nailed down before we do anything too crazy with hacking and getting stations and stuff in. But rest assured that is something I would like to do. So we'll get there one day. In the meantime, I think that is going to do it for today's episode. Of course, if you have any comments, suggestions, questions about the layouts that I've built today, please let me know in the comments. As I always say, I love getting your feedback, especially if there's stuff that I need to fix. So we're going to end, as always, with some ride-ons. Hope you enjoyed watching me build, and I will see you next time. Thanks for watching.